What's up guys, Matthew Monas here, and the Huawei P20 Pro's been getting a lot of coverage. But what about the smaller P20? Technically on DxOMark, it's ranked higher than every other smartphone on the market except for the P20 Pro. Now of course, I take DxOMarks with a grain of salt. But I did find some amazing results with the P20, and I'm gonna show you while I put it up against the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. In the first photo, we have a picture of a toy chest. And as you can see on the P20, the dynamic range is a little bit better. The reds are a little bit deeper. You can see the shades around the orange. And if you look at the left-hand wall, it's not nearly as overexposed as it is on the Galaxy S9 Plus. Now don't get me wrong, the S9 Plus still looks great. I just think in this photo, it's slightly overexposing it. Now in this shot, both shots look pretty similar. In fact, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if I put them right in front of you, but we have slightly more detail on the Galaxy S9 Plus, and you can kind of make out the clouds a little bit better. The grass is slightly greener on the P20, whereas on the Galaxy S9 Plus, it kind of favors the reds, but overall, both photos look pretty darn good. It's not until you go to the next photo, which is basically the same thing, but with HDR on. This is where you see the big difference. On the P20, you see a lot more detail in the clouds. And the further you look, the more detail you still see, whereas on the Galaxy S9 Plus, it kind of gets lost a little bit. Also, I think the P20 is doing a slightly better job with the shadows, but there is a little bit of a green cast on the side of the building compared to the S9 Plus. So this photo is very interesting. Both phones handled it perfectly. Now, because the S9 Plus has a higher aperture, it most likely took this with f1.5 open. The background is slightly blurred, whereas on the P20 you're going to see a lot more detail because the aperture is a little bit lower. Now the detail in the clouds is slightly better again on the P20. It's a little bit more of a bluish tone to the actual sky, whereas on the S9 Plus it's kind of washed out a little bit. In terms of shadows, I think on the flower pot itself, the P20 did a better job, but if you look just below the flower pot, the S9 Plus captured more details in the shadows compared to the P20. Now in this pic, HDR is on for both photos, and as you can see, those shadows below the flower pot kind of return to the P20. I think the P20 has more dynamic range and does a better job with the shadows, but looks slightly over sharpened. Now in this simple shot of the trees, I wanted to show AI kicking in on the Huawei phone. Huawei is detecting greenery, so it's bumping up the contrast in the leaves, and of course you get a slightly greener tree, which overall looks like it has more dynamic range. Now I think the shadows are a lot better. It looks a little bit more full on the P20, and the grass is a little bit more green as well, but overall both of these phones handled this shot perfectly. In this photo, I wanted to show dynamic range. Now both of these cameras did a fantastic job. In fact, you probably couldn't really tell that much of a difference. If anything, there might be slightly more dynamic range in the P20, but it's not that noticeable. It's not until you turn HDR on that you see the biggest difference. The punchy colors in the P20 start to be more apparent. As you can see, the reds are a lot deeper and of course a little bit more darker. You do see the bump up in the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus, but it's not nearly as visible as it is on the P20. Now we get to nighttime shots. This is where things start to get very interesting. Now we know the P20 has a great nighttime mode, which takes fantastic shots at night. In this photo, I think the P20 did a better job of picking out the details. Like if you look close at the window, you can see a lot more detail. The light's not nearly as blown out. If you look closer to the door on the left-hand side, you can see the door a little bit better. But I personally like the way the Galaxy S9 Plus looks in this picture. I like the warm tone to it. It still gets enough detail to make it a pleasing photo, and the grass actually looks a little bit more green. The next photo, things start to change again. This is where the P20 starts to take the advantage. Now, as you can see here, the P20 did a better job of picking up the Dollarama sign. It's not nearly as blown out compared to the Galaxy S9 Plus. The $1 logo behind the tree is a lot more visible. But take a look at the sky. Do you notice a big difference there? On the right-hand side, you can actually see the building on the P20 and the crane on top of it, whereas on the Galaxy S9 Plus, it couldn't get a hold of it at all. Also in the middle, you see the building a lot better, and if you take a look at the lights on the left-hand side, the P20 does a better job of picking them up. Here's another great nighttime photo. Again, the P20 just does a much better job. Look at the red sign on the building. You can see the lights perfectly, whereas on the Galaxy S9 Plus, it's completely been blown out. The sign just below it, you can see the shadows better. It's not nearly as overexposed. And even if you look at the master words on the right-hand side of the picture, it's a little bit more overexposed on the S9 Plus, making it slightly harder to read. Next up is portrait mode or live focus on the Galaxy S9 Plus. As you can see here, again, the P20 does a better job. It picks up the colors better. It's a lot lot more accurate, whereas on the Galaxy S9 Plus, you have that beauty mode being pasted on, making her complexion a bit too smooth. There's also a bit of a green overcast in the photo itself. Moving on to selfies, and this is where I decided to make things a little bit different. Instead of just taking like a good selfie and good lighting, I decided to like put a bright light on the side of my head, overexposing the image, just to see how these front-facing shooters would handle it. On the P20, I got good coloring almost every single time. Whereas on the Galaxy S9 Plus, the color was off, I was out of focus, and it took me about 4 to 5 shots for it to pick it up correctly and take a great photo. And finally, we have video. This is 1080p, both of them look fantastic. I think the Galaxy S9 Plus, the coloring looks a little bit better. There's more dynamic range. In terms of smoothness, pretty even. I wouldn't say there's an advantage with either one. I think that overall they did both a great job, but I like the colors better on the Galaxy S9 Plus. Now when it comes to 4K, this is where things take a turn again. The S9 Plus looks exactly like it did in 1080. You can see the clouds better, it's not overexposed, it just looks a lot more visually appealing. Whereas on the P20, it just looks like a mess. OIS is not working because it's disabled in 4K, there's a lot of shaky movement, it's not really good footage. So here are my closing thoughts. I really like the camera on the P20, and most of these photos it did a better job than the Galaxy S9 Plus, especially in night mode. But it's really interesting that the results I'm getting with the P20 are very different from the P20 Pro. I think the P20 Pro has an amazing camera, but you have to be aware of what settings you are using in order to take a great photo. If you want something that shoots on auto and you don't have to worry about tinkering with settings at all, I think the P20 does a much better job. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say, and if you want to see more pictures from the P20 and the P20 Pro, make sure to follow me on Instagram. I'll have a bunch on there, and you can even ask me questions if you really want to. So that wraps up this camera comparison. Let me know which one is your favorite in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next one.